Well, we got a special guest with us today. We've got Chip Weiner, which you're now a two-timer.
Yes.
This is your second time on.
Yes.
So you're a glutton for punishment. You decided to come back.
And proud to do it. Proud to be so. And thanks for having me.
Well,
It's
thank
really
you for taking time.
You know, we're glad to get together with you.
Invade your home here.
Please.
Your patio.
Yeah.
So here we are in beautiful Tampa.
So how long has it been since we last? It's been several years, hasn't it, since we last?
I think I was still shooting for Creative Loafing, so
yes,
it's
right.
got to
in fact,
be.
I think we did the interview
at Creative Loafing.
At the Creative Loafing building, yeah.
So, gosh, I don't know, 5 years or more, probably
Easily
more.
5, maybe a little bit more
than
that.
at the time, so
Right.
it's probably 6 or 7 years.
Okay, right.
Well, tell us what you've been doing between then and now. You got 7 years to catch up.
Oh,
we'll
my
sit here
goodness.
and wait.
Good, because this is a 5-hour podcast, because that's
It's going to be, I guess.
I guess most recently I have delved into retaking photographs, vintage photographs. I was doing a personal project. Working for Creative Living, I met a bunch of just awesome people. And I was working a project back in 2019, a personal project of taking portraits of those folks, mostly creatives. And I love taking them in their studios or wherever they're working and shooting them there and just getting this beautiful environmental portrait. And then COVID came along.
Mm-hmm.
And
affected a lot of things.
Yeah, it sure did. And I can't shut down that creative juice. I can't, so I needed something new. And I had known about the Burgert collection and tapped into that. And there was a whole process that went with it. But since that time, I've spent the last 3 years rephotographing the Burgert collection first, and now I've come across a brand new collection at University of South Florida, digital collection from Tampa photographer Skip Gandy. And we are about to publish 80,000 of his photographs that go from the 1960s really through 2000. So we'll have this beautiful 100-year visual history of Tampa. The Burgerts were from the late 1800s to about 1960. And then Skip Gandy picked it up in the 60s. Skip Gandy and his dad picked it up in the 60s and brought it into 2000. So with both of those collections together, we have this just beautiful history of Tampa, visual history.
Describe vintage. These black and white.
The majority of them are black and white. Some of Gandy's are color, but yeah, Burgerts weren't around really when when color film was available. So the majority of them are, and so my book has the original books have the original Gandy black and white, and then a current day digital color. And it's this beautiful juxtaposition of what was and what is. Some of them you get to look and see the building that is still there, because some of the buildings have been beautifully done. Too many of the blurbs in my book end with, and it is now a parking lot, because a lot of those buildings came down. But yeah, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful project. I just really love it. It's been so well received in the public.
Again, what years did you say it covered?
The Burgert started in the late 1800s, so my images, I would say, start in the early 1920s, all the way through the 1960s. And the 2 volumes now have like 475 pairs of photographs from old Tampa and new Tampa. So absolutely wonderful project, and it's been a lot of time doing it. I think my favorite part of doing that project was not just looking at the photographs, but also then doing research. And really I came up with this catchphrase. You've heard the idea that every picture tells a story. But what I've determined is every picture has a story, and if you'll dig in and look, some of the buildings, some of the people, some of the things that have happened, it makes for this wonderful collection of not only the visual history, but also a little blurb of what's happened in Tampa related to those buildings and related to those scenes. And so much I didn't know, so I'm kind of an amateur, I guess, Tampa historian now, 3 years with my nose in the history of those photographs.
I can only imagine, because I moved here in the early 60s, and I know how much it's changed in that time. So
a lot of places. But it's, to me, what intrigued me is that you brought things to the forefront. Hey, this is Tampa. Yes, it's changed, and in some ways it stayed the same.
Right.
And some of the buildings have been reclaimed
Right.
to keep them because the architecture in some of these areas.
Yes.
Ybor comes to mind as one area
Yes.
that's got some beautiful architecture, and I'm glad to see that we're saving it. And then you've helped to kind of go in there and help us say, here's the original photographs of that, and here's some of what we see today. I think that's cool.
Well,
But that's not the only thing that this gentleman likes
Like
to
the
do.
cigar factories. I think
Yeah.
there's only one cigar factory left now. That's
One cigar factory that's
still
manufacturing,
made
yeah,
out.
the,
I
the,
actually
Newman
did a lot of
cigars.
consulting
Yeah.
back in the, I guess it was in mid-70s.
Right.
Some of the cigar factories, which are gone now.
Gone now.
And-
But what I was going to talk about is that, yes, you're all over Tampa, but you go to a lot of places, restaurants, eateries, and do food photography,
I do.
which is quite interesting because I know you were interrupted by the pandemic,
Yes.
but at the same time, leading up to that, and as soon as you could afterwards, you were back out doing it. I remember that I saw one of your images and I said, good, you're back doing
Yeah.
that because you're good at it.
Yeah,
I'm glad
thank
you're
you.
doing it.
Thank you.
Besides,
So,
how
that's
often
cool
you get
stuff.
to eat the subject when you're
That's right.
You know, it's cool because you're taking restaurants and eateries that we might not even know about.
Right.
You know, you're finding not just the ones that are prominent,
Right.
but ones with the history.
Yes.
In many cases, well, this family owned it, and this family owned it, and now
Yes.
this family.
Yes.
So that's kind of interesting because you bring the backstory with that, and of course, newer restaurants or kind of rebooting of some restaurants,
Right.
and opening up a different restaurant in the same venue
Right.
after they've gone through it. That to me is interesting. Yes, the food is cool, the photography is great, but I go for that backstory.
Yeah.
That's when I want to know the history and why they did this and who did that. And sometimes there's a renowned chef or
Right.
well-known person that is involved with that.
Right.
And you bring it out with just a few photos, sometimes one or two or a small grouping.
But you know what you're talking about, I think, is the essence of what got me going, keeps me going really, with these vintage photos as well as the food. When I take a photograph of downtown Tampa, you know, that's relatively recent, maybe more of the Gandhi stuff, and put it online, there's a site on Facebook that's the Tampa History page. So a lot of people that are from Tampa go on that page, and when I put an image up there of something, I mean, it's an instant hit. I put one up the other day. Oh, it was at Tampa International Airport, the first DC-8 jet to Chicago, and you know, so it was a big deal. And all the people are standing out on the tarmac, and it was just this image of the way things used to be. And I think the next day, 500 likes, 300 comments, because when people are reminded of where they were and what they saw, there's something in our brain that, boy, we like it. We like being reminded.
When flying was fun.
Yes, and that's part of my
Easy.
commentary of, man, how cool was it back then where we weren't standing in security lines, and
Right.
it's that kind of thing. Some of the stories that I tell, Haber's department store was one that was in downtown Tampa.
That was a good one.
Remember,
Yeah.
Wow, what a cool story that was. And you know, again, the photograph was there, and as I did the research of that, I knew the store, but I didn't know the history. And unfortunately, Mr. Haber was murdered in his home on Davis Island and his wife served 25 years in prison because she put it all together.
Wow.
And I think that history is important not only because of the photographs, but for us to remember as we look around today and we think about how difficult things are, and they're difficult. It's not that the past was just this beautiful panacea of loveliness, that we have had trials and tribulations throughout the years,
Well,
and
big
I think it's important for us to remember
Pandemic
that too.
back in 1918?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spanish flu.
The Spanish
so-called.
flu was
Right.
such a
Right.
big deal and
Right.
affected this area
Right.
very heavily.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, well, we were just recently at Fort DeSoto, and I guess they actually had a hospital, but they were taking the influenza patients.
Yes.
and
back when it
keeping them
was
there.
Army
Right.
Yep.
was occupying it, using it for training, and also it was kind of a defensive area because of where it was situated.
Drew Park in Tampa, sort of that same thing. That was the air base for a while.
Yeah.
And the hospital there then turned into the tuberculosis hospital because that came up after the site was decommissioned. But all of that history in Tampa. And as far as the food is concerned, a lot of folks like knowing the background. You know, what is this chef and what's the Michelin stars and all of that. But if you can put a description of food with a photograph that makes people's mouth water, and that's what I go for, because people look at it and say, I want to eat that. I'm like, I can't hear anything better. That's the best compliment you can give a food photographer,
Right.
is that I saw that and I want to go try that food.
Where can people see your photos?
That's a great question. Thank you. There are a few sites. There's oldtampaphotos.com, and that's just a...
We're going to put the list down in
Cool.
the notes too.
Gosh, there's so many photos on there of the old photos. I'm going to wait for this to go by.
Okay.
Bustling Tampa.
That's
Yes.
it. Welcome to South Tampa. I also have a food blog that's called photogfoodie.com, and that's where a lot of the food photos are. Chipshots.com is my general website. And then there's Lens on Tampa Bay, because when I'm not shooting food or doing vintage, I like going out and shooting events, because that's that photojournalist in me. I like going out and capturing and writing about what's happening. And people on Facebook and other social media like seeing it as well, because not everybody is everywhere. And you know, newspapers these days have difficulty keeping up with trends and all of that.
I want to say you got a Facebook page as well. Then
I do.
Under your name. Okay.
Right.
do.
So
Right.
you're on social media, but you also have dedicated sites.
Correct.
And I forgot to even mention the fact that, you know, the street photography, the photojournalism,
Yes.
I mean, you're like an onion. You have a lot of layers going on here.
Yes.
But that's cool, because I can tell, and I know with just talking with you, hanging out with you, you love every bit of it.
Every bit of it.
And
should
it's not necessarily your full-time gig.
It is not my full-time
I
gig.
should mention too, we're actually in Tampa doing
Yes.
the interview
Yeah.
right
Right.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
I said that earlier, buddy.
Did you? I didn't hear you. I wouldn't pay attention. I saw your lips move.
Yeah, that's pretty normal.
Selective listening.
Yeah.
Well, you know, when you've been, it's like we're siblings almost.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
I should
known each other
mention
for so
that
long.
Right
Right.
now we're in Tampa.
Right. We are? Man, I'm lost.
Oh,
The other piece, and thanks to Fred, I've restarted the environmental portrait stuff, and so I've invited artists and people to participate in that project, and got to shoot a wonderful series with Fred.
oh, that was fun.
Yeah, and maybe we'll do it with Jim as well. But it's, again,
Jim
putting
ready.
people in their environment and showing their art, their creativity. And if it can have some fun to it, I really like that as well. But it's not, here is Jim holding a camera. It's, here is Jim in his environment doing what he does. How do you add some dynamics to that?
Try to bring out the personality
Correct.
of the person. Right?
Maybe a little whimsy, because I know Fred and he likes to cut up, and so the photo shoot we had was just a ball. We went out into the woods somewhere and just had a lot of fun.
And basically, I had more gear than probably I
Right.
ever needed.
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
I think Fred told me where
Yeah.
you hung
Yeah, we
additional cameras
loaded
in.
him up
Loaded
with
me up,
cameras.
and then you had the insecticide sticking out of my
Yeah.
front pocket. It was
Should
just
have had
a
a little flower in your
genius
hair.
idea.
Yeah.
Well, I was almost tempted to have some, you know, debris on me, but
Yeah,
his photos where I'm coming out of that wetland area
yes.
were great. And the interesting thing, I saw him at first and couldn't appreciate him as much as I should have until I started sharing them. People went, "This is you.
Yeah.
This is what we think of when we think of you and your photography." And I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny because with portraiture of any type, sometimes it's hard to appreciate it at first.
Yes.
You can say, well, this is nice, well lit, well composed, and which they all were, but sometimes, and I don't photograph myself, and I don't necessarily like to be photographed. I'd
Right.
rather be on the back side of the camera.
Right.
But doing this was something that I thought, well, this is fun. If it's Chip, I'm game. Let's try it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where it really kind of pulled it together. And each time I look at that, I can appreciate it a little bit more. And the responses that I got when I shared
Yeah.
a couple of those, and then you shared some, and the responses you got from people that were, I don't even know, and
Right.
they're going, that's great. You did a, you know, it's interesting because they saw it in a way that I wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
see it, because I was looking at myself.
Yes.
And that's a little tougher to do. I could appreciate, because there's other pictures that you took of the gentleman with holding the chick or duckling in his hand.
Oh, yeah.
With the
With the
metal
sparks, yeah.
coming off of the grinder,
Yeah.
and he's got a hand up.
Yeah.
He's holding that and got the hand blocking the sparks. And I thought, that is interesting. That is cool. And this guy looks like Mr. Bad Guy.
Yeah,
and here he is, you know, like a puppy with a heart.
Yes.
Because he's got that little, oh, I'm not going to let you get hurt,
Right.
you know. And that spoke volumes to me. So looking at your other photos, I had a more immediate and deeper appreciation. It's interesting when you see yourself. I don't
Yes.
know how you react when you see a photo of yourself, but you know, well, yeah, there it is. Okay, there it is. That's me.
That's why we don't do selfies.
There you go. Yeah, my
Also,
preference is that I get together with the folks first, and if I can have half an hour of their time,
Yeah.
Right.
tell me about you and tell me who you are and what you're about and what's your favorite color. I don't know, but how do I capture that? And then when someone says, Fred, this is the essence of you, again, that just makes my day, because that's what a portrait is. It's not just a photograph of someone.
Right.
It's this tells a story about Fred, and it sounds like it told it well. So that's
I
good.
think it did. Like I said, from the reactions I got,
Yeah.
that's when I immediately said, well, it's a great photo, but it's not my credit. I didn't do this. This is all Chip, and you know,
wanted to
and I
say,
think that's
too,
great when we can take a fellow photographer and say, no, this guy is good, you know. And for me, it was a different audience looking at that
Right.
than the audience that might be looking at your site,
Right.
you know. So that yes, you should be very gratified because it was well received
Good.
in many areas. So
Good.
mission accomplished. Job
Awesome.
well
I
done.
wanted to say too that if you're doing photography and you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong.
Exactly
so
right.
why bother? Right?
Yeah.
It's not a job, and when people say, "Gosh, you know, you do so much," there is a part, I think, of photographers, long-term photographers, that it really is in their blood. And when I've got a camera in my hand, the world changes. And so for those folks who are wondering, well, gosh, how do I get started and how do I sell my photography? I'm going to suggest to you that's probably not the right take. That if you're not doing it for you first and getting those good images and showing people really what you can do, but you're enjoying it, I don't know if you're going to really make a career out of it.
No.
Because whether the money
why
comes or
bother
not.
if you're not
Right.
enjoying it? I mean,
So photojournalist, food photographer, vintage photographer, but I always have something that I can do. And sometimes photographers say, well, I don't have anything to shoot. What? My goodness, there's a whole world out there waiting
Yeah.
for you. So don't get discouraged. Pick up the camera and go somewhere, and that
challenge
photo will
yourself,
appear.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just, you know, if you're seeing our background, there's these beautiful bonsais behind us. Another part of Chip that I didn't really know about, and of course, immediately I wanted to get my camera and said, let me set this up. I want to start taking photos of these
Yeah.
because that appealed to me.
Yeah.
You know, where some nature and wildlife photographers would go, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But I like a lot of plant photography. That speaks to me, and that's
Right.
what's interesting about it. It's like all these different types of photography, these genres, if you will,
Yes.
speak to you.
Right.
And we can tell. Folks, really, you want to, if you want somebody to take a really organic portrait, this guy is the one to do it.
Thank you.
because the way you do it.
Thank you.
You're not a studio kind of guy. You say, let's go somewhere where you're comfortable, where you like, that,
Right.
that speaks of you.
Right.
Good. Bring out your essence, right?
Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
Bring out the essence.
Bring out the essence.
How do you
So
do that?
that's going to be interesting
Which
because
is a challenge, and
I guess we're going to have to put
Sounds like
Jim
a
in
lot
a
of fun.
totally different environment. I don't know. I'm not sure with this guy.
hang me
Okay.
upside down or something.
Suspend you from a tree with a camera. There you go.
We can do that.
forward to
We can do that. We have the technology.
There you go.
Well, this summer, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to impart on our viewers?
Stay active. Support the arts. Support other photographers along with yourself. Take care of yourself. And I hope that photography is part of that by picking up your camera, shooting your family, shooting your neighbors. Goodness, I don't know. Take photographs for your church newsletter. Help the community. Give instead of try to get. How do you give back? How do you take care of yourself in that way? What I'm hoping, and I've thought about for a long time, is I'd like to deal with folks maybe that are having some mental health issues and get them together with a camera and let's go. And you know, if I say, all right, take a picture of your depression. What? Yeah, I don't care what it looks like, but take a picture of something that represents your depression, and then we can get together and it opens up dialogue, and they're able to talk about what's going on with them, and there's this whole process that could go with it. I haven't figured out really the foundation of all of that yet,
That'd
but
be a great one for veterans too.
veterans especially.
Yes.
And we're actually looking at something along with the Stress Center, the place down there, that are doing some work with veterans. And so I don't know how all of that's going to pan out. What I know is that even the folks that aren't sure of themselves with a camera, you can get sure of yourself. Look, 30 years later, I'm still learning. Still learning.
So am I.
Right.
I don't think
And
we're
it
ever
always
stopped.
will be.
Right. Right.
And I like the fact that you say support other photographers, support each other, because you learn from each other.
Yes,
Oh yeah,
you do.
absolutely.
You, the things you do that are not really normally in my wheelhouse, make me
Right.
kind of stop and go, huh.
Right.
That was one of the reasons for the
You know,
podcast too,
yes.
and our YouTube channel.
Okay.
So, you know, getting to see people who do what they do, some of it's very relatable, like yours. Others are on the what we call the fringes of that
Yes.
photograph,
Yeah.
photography, and videography
Right.
area. But it's funny because it's a web.
Yes.
It's a network in
Yes.
a way, even though a lot of people don't realize how connected we are
Right.
with that. So I think that's why I enjoy seeing your stuff, talking to you about it, because you always have an interesting spin on where your thinking was
Yeah.
when you did that.
And I'm looking forward to number 3.
Okay.
Yes.
Chip. I
Thank you
appreciate
both
it.
Yes.
so much. I really
Yes, you
appreciate
get the gold
it.
jacket.
Thank
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good,
we'll
good.
get the photo bug jacket.
The
I
photo
really
bug
enjoy
jacket, yeah.
talking about it and being with you guys. So thanks again for having me. It's been,
Thank you.
been a
Oh,
blast.
Oh, no, thank you. All our pleasure.
Our pleasure, yes.